How does a person keep a secret for 2 months, stand next to you at your own wedding, and smile for photographs in a white dress, and then say it out loud at a cafe table on an ordinary Saturday morning? I thought what happened at the Lakehouse was finished, sealed, something that would stay between the people who were there. I did not count on guilt, or on a husband who had already started asking questions before the words even left her mouth. And I did not know that a marriage I spent a year planning could end over a single cup of coffee before the brunch plates were even cleared. My name is Selene Varga. I am 30 years old, and I manage client accounts at an advertising firm where my primary skill is controlling what people know and how they know it. I am good at sequencing information, at deciding which details arrive first and which arrive later or not at all. I applied this skill to my marriage, which was 2 months old when this story begins, and to the weekend that made my marriage necessary to manage. The Bachelorette weekend was at a Lakehouse resort 40 minutes outside the city. On the Saturday night, I met a man named Marco at the photo strip machine near the bar entrance. We spent time together that crossed a line. A 4-frame strip was taken. Me and Marco, close, the kind of close that is unambiguous. Petra, my best friend and maid of honor, had the physical copy. I had the memory and the understanding that what happened before my wedding was a separate category from the marriage itself. 2 months later, Dimitri and I are married and living on Morley Street, and the categorization is under pressure. Dimitri is 33, a structural engineer. He understands the precise point at which pressure becomes failure. He is not dramatic. He notices things quietly and holds them until he understands them, which I had always found attractive and now found uncomfortable. On a February morning, I was on the balcony at 20 to 7, texting Petra about whether Cass had a copy of the strip. 3 days after the wedding, I had found a physical copy in a borrowed weekend bag and put it in the zipped pocket of my grey coat, where it had been for 6 weeks. Petra's reply said, "Stop texting me about this before he wakes up." Inside, Dimitri handed me coffee and said the forecast was fine. I had told him I was checking the weather. That evening, he asked, over dinner, whether Petra had seemed different lately. He described a specific moment at a gallery the previous Sunday. Her goodbye expression, caught, guilty. I told him Petra was having a difficult personal period. He said he was asking a simple question. I said I had answered it. Before bed, he said he wanted to understand the Bachelorette weekend. He mentioned the weekend bag, unpacked 2 months ago, and a smell he could not place. Lake water and photo strip developer. He had looked it up. He asked whether anything from that weekend was something she would stand behind in 6 months. I told him it was a scented candle that had melted into the fabric. He said he hoped that was right and went to sleep. At 20 to midnight, my phone buzzed with a preview from an unknown number. "Cass gave me your number. I think you should know I also have..." The screen locked. I sat up. I did not sleep. In the morning, Dimitri had arranged a Saturday brunch. Petra, Owen, Cass. He had already texted everyone. Petra's reply in the thread was a single word. "Okay." No warmth. The reply of someone afraid of what Saturday would ask of her. I called the unknown number on Thursday morning from the Morley Street footpath, standing 10 feet from the building entrance with my breath visible in the cold air. A man answered and said his name was Rudy. He said he had been at the Lakehouse conference with Marco, and that Marco had mentioned the photo strip to him. Not the context, just that it existed, and that he wanted to let me know in case it was relevant. He said he was not trying to cause trouble. I asked how he had my number. He said Cass gave it to him because she thought I should know. I told him, in a completely controlled voice, that the situation was handled and that I appreciated the call. I ended the call and texted Cass 2 words. She called back in 4 minutes, and we spoke in the careful, chosen language of 2 people who are aware that what they say cannot be unsaid. I asked whether she had a digital copy of the photo strip from the machine's shared folder option. She said she did not think so. She said she had not checked recently. By the end of the call, I understood that Cass was no longer fully on my side. Not out of malice, but out of the discomfort of someone who has been covering something long enough to feel the exact weight of what they are covering. I went to Petra's apartment that same evening without texting first and sat with her at her kitchen table. She had a pale ceramic mug with a small chip on the rim, the one she has never thrown away, and she wrapped both hands around it while I explained, in a calm and logical sequence, that the Saturday brunch was a social occasion and that she needed to behave as she had been behaving for 2 months. Normally. She said she had been trying. She said that every time Dimitri asked her a direct question, she could feel the answer rising in her throat, and it was becoming harder to hold it down. I told her that what she was describing was guilt, and that guilt was a choice about where to put your attention. She said she did not think I understood what I was actually asking her to do to a man she liked. I said I understood exactly what I was asking. On Thursday afternoon, Dimitri came home an hour later than usual. He said he had a meeting that ran long. Earlier that day, I had noticed a new entry on the shared wall calendar in his handwriting: Strand Row, 3 p.m. Strand Row was not near his office or any of his current project sites. When he came in, he was quieter than tired. It was the quiet of someone who has been somewhere that required focus and is still absorbing the weight of it. He made tea and did not chase the threads of our previous night's conversations. He asked how the client call went. I said fine. He went to the home office and closed the door. 20 minutes later, I heard him on the phone through the hallway gap. A low, measured voice, the rhythm of someone giving information rather than receiving it. I did not stand there long enough to hear specifics. When he came out, he sat across from me and asked whether I had looked at the group chat, because Petra's single-word reply stood out clearly against the continued activity from Owen and Cass, who had both stayed visible in the thread for the rest of the evening. He said he liked Petra and was not trying to make something of a text message, but he noticed patterns, and this one had been consistent since the wedding ceremony. He asked me specifically what would make a maid of honor, the person standing closest to us on the day, change so noticeably in the 2 months after the ceremony, and whether the change had started before the wedding or after it. I told him that reading character changes into group chat response timings was an engineering habit that did not transfer well to human friendships. I said it almost as a joke. He did not laugh. He said he was going to ask her directly on Saturday. I told him that was fine, and that he would find out she was simply having a difficult personal season. He nodded once and said he hoped so. Before bed, he stood with me on the balcony and said he wanted to say something once without repeating it. He said that if anything had happened at the Bachelorette weekend that she had not told him, he would rather hear it from her than piece it together from other people's expressions and silences. He named the bag smell again. He had not forgotten it, and the photo strip developer chemical, which he had since confirmed online, was specific to instant strip machines and distinct from any candle or fabric product. He asked what had been photographed that weekend and whether any of the photographs included people who were not part of the invited group. I told him I was not going to stand on my own balcony and justify Bachelorette weekend memories to a man who had been conducting a quiet review from a calendar entry and a bag smell. I went inside. He stayed on the balcony for 10 minutes after I left. I watched him through the living room glass from across the room and told myself this was still manageable. Friday afternoon, Dimitri added a new entry to the shared digital calendar. Noel. All afternoon, Sunday. Sunday was 1 day after the brunch he had arranged for Saturday. He had pre-arranged a debrief with his brother for the day after the event. I took a screenshot of the calendar entry without knowing what I was going to do with it. Friday evening, Petra called and said that if Dimitri asked her a direct question on Saturday, clear, specific, honest, she did not know what she would do. I said she needed to know. She said she did not know. She hung up. I was standing in the apartment hallway when the call ended, and from behind the closed home office door, I heard a brief electronic chime, the sound a cloud backup makes when a file has finished uploading. I stood in the hallway for a moment and did not open the door. I went to bed instead. We were in the corner booth at Briar Lane Coffee by 10 past 10 on Saturday morning. The espresso machine behind the counter was running a continuous cycle, a high rhythmic hiss of the steam wand against cold milk that filled the gaps between sentences and gave the booth its particular acoustic quality, voices curving inward, making the space feel more private than it was. I had arranged myself next to Cass. Petra sat across from Dimitri. Owen was at the end. We had been meeting in this configuration on Saturdays for 2 years, and the routine of it had always felt like safety. It did not feel safe this morning. Petra was not looking at the menu. She knew exactly what she was ordering. She was not looking at Dimitri. The brunch started as it always started. Owen talked about a renovation project that had run over budget. Cass ordered her cortado. Dimitri asked about the cafe because he had never been here on a full Saturday when all the tables were occupied, and I answered and kept my voice easy and my posture open. The food arrived. The steam wand ran a second cycle and stopped. I thought, if the conversation stays on the renovation and the cafe and the small ordinary news of a Saturday morning, this will pass. 20 minutes in, with the food half eaten and the table comfortable, Dimitri said to Petra, in a tone that was completely level and without any signal of what was coming, that he wanted to ask her something. He said he had been noticing something for 2 months and would rather ask her directly than keep assuming, because he respected her. He asked whether anything happened at the Bachelorette weekend that Celine had not told him about. It was an open question. It was not an accusation. It was the question of a man who trusted the person he was asking more, in that moment, than he trusted the account he had been given. The steam wand was silent. The machine ran at its lower frequency underneath everything. I said Petra's name, just her name, one syllable, a signal we had understood between us for 10 years. She looked at me for 2 full seconds. Then she looked at Dimitri and said yes. She said it quietly and without preamble. She said there had been a man at the Lakehouse bar on the second night, the Saturday, and that she should have told him before this point. She said she was sorry. She stopped there because she did not need to say more than that. Cass was looking at the surface of the table. Owen was looking at Petra. My coffee cup was in my hand, and I set it down. I said immediately and clearly that this was not what it sounded like, that what happened at the Lakehouse was a brief and meaningless encounter with someone met before the ceremony, technically days before the ceremony, and that placed it in a different category from the marriage itself. I heard myself use the word technically. Dimitri was looking at me, not with rage and not with the hurt expression I had imagined. He had the expression of a man who has just confirmed something he suspected and is deciding in real time what to do with that confirmation. Owen said my name, quietly, the way people say someone's name when they want them to stop talking before more damage is done. Cass had not moved since Petra finished speaking. Dimitri put his napkin on the table in a single unhurried motion. He reached back and took his jacket from the hook at the booth's back rail. He told me, in a measured and even tone, that he was going to leave and that we needed to talk, but not here, and not today. He thanked Petra. He said it without any sarcasm and without weight, the straightforward thanks of a man acknowledging something difficult and correct. He said goodbye to Owen. He did not say goodbye to Cass. He walked to the revolving door and went through it into the grey February street outside. The steam wand started its cycle again. The sound was exactly the same. The booth was not. The 4 of us sat for several minutes. Petra was crying quietly, the specific and unhurried kind that comes when a weight has finally been set down and the relief precedes the processing of it. I said to her, in a voice I kept low, that she had just destroyed my marriage. Owen said gently that he did not think that was what had just happened. I looked at him. He held the look and did not add anything. Cass asked if we should leave. We left. The booth held the unfinished remains of 5 plates of food that had been ordered for a different morning than the one that arrived. I unlocked the apartment door to a space that was already different. Dimitri's overnight bag was gone from the hallway. Not the full luggage, just the small one for his brother's house. His spare key was on the kitchen counter, placed in the middle of the surface with the deliberateness of something meant to be found and understood. His phone charger was gone from the bedroom socket. The home office door was open and the desk was clear. The grey work notebook and the blue one he used for current projects were both gone. On the wall calendar, Noel, all afternoon was written for Sunday in his handwriting, arranged before the cafe, before Petra said yes. He had planned the day after before Saturday arrived. She called him. He did not answer. At 4:30, a message came from a number she did not recognize, different from Rudy's, entirely new. It said, "You should know I sent what I had to someone who asked me. Marco's number." She called it back immediately and it rang through 3 times and went to voicemail. A notification arrived from the calendar app. Dimitri had removed his account from the shared digital calendar. The grid showed blank squares where his entries used to be. She opened the brunch group chat and typed a message. The context, the timeline, the technical fact of the ceremony date. She sent it. Owen read it and did not reply. Cass read it and did not reply. Petra began typing and then stopped, and no message arrived from her either. The group chat was silent for the rest of the evening and into the next morning. Dimitri came back to the apartment on Monday morning to collect more of his things. He was staying at Noel's. He sat at the kitchen table and asked me to confirm one fact: the man's name. He asked it in a tone that was organized and not unkind. He had a small grey notebook in his coat pocket, which I had not seen before, and when I said the name, he wrote it down. He asked for the sequence, not a framing, but the order of events. Which night, who else was present, where the photograph was taken. I gave him the facts. He wrote them. He closed the notebook, thanked me, collected what he had come for, and left. The spare key stayed on the kitchen counter. He did not take it. I drove to Yara's house that same afternoon without an invitation. Yara is Dimitri's mother, and I had decided that a conversation with her might create a bridge before anything became formal. I sat at her dining table and told her the version I had prepared. I was afraid. I made one mistake in a moment of pre-wedding anxiety. I loved her son, and had been carrying the weight of this alone because I could not bear to damage what we were building, and I was asking for the understanding that a young wife in a frightened situation deserved. I said it well. I am good at this. Yara set a glass of water in front of me and listened to the whole thing. Then she said she had heard what I was saying and that I was describing my own fear with great clarity. She said she did not think Dimitri's hurt was smaller because I had been afraid. She said she was going to support whatever her son decided, and that I was welcome to call her if I needed someone to talk to, but that she could not advocate for a position when she had only heard one side. She already knew his side. That was clear from the way she poured the water. I sat with the water glass for another 5 minutes and tried once more. I asked whether she thought 2 months of silence might indicate something other than dishonesty, whether it might indicate protection, love, the specific fear of losing something you have just been given. Yara looked at me and said that she thought protection and dishonesty were the same thing when one person carried both and the other person carried neither. She said she hoped things would become clearer for everyone in time. I drove home understanding that the empathy play had not created a bridge. It had demonstrated to the one person in his family I had tried to reach that I was still managing the story rather than telling the truth. I went to Petra's apartment on Tuesday. She told me she had already given Dimitri the full sequence: the night, the name, the photo strip, Cass's proximity when it was taken, Rudy's contact to me. She told him about all of it, including the 2 months she had spent covering it at my request. She said she told him because he asked her a direct question and she was done answering indirect ones. I asked what exactly she had said about the physical strip. She said she described it. 4 frames, taken at the Lakehouse bar, in the possession of one of the people involved. I drove home. In the building's entrance hall on the mail table, there was a padded envelope addressed to Dimitri from a firm called Hartley & Cole. I had never heard of it. I left it on the table. That evening, Dimitri called from Knowles. His voice was even. He said he wanted to propose something. He had identified a mediation service, and he would like them both to attend one initial session before any formal decisions were made. He said it was not a concession or a threat. It was a reasonable next step for 2 people who needed to understand what they were deciding. He mentioned the photo strip, which he now knew existed as a physical object, and said it was the kind of detail he preferred to address through a structured process. He was telling me he knew about the physical copy. I asked how. He said Petra had described it. He asked whether she still had it, and whether he should know about any other physical records from that weekend that might be relevant. I told him I resented the implication that I had been managing an evidence situation rather than processing a mistake, and that I would not engage with the vocabulary of records. He said he was not using it as a legal term. He said he would send the mediators details. I said I would think about it. I had no intention of attending. That night, I went to the Home Office to find a stamp receipt. The printer had been used recently. The paper tray was slightly open. The output tray held only the faint mechanical warmth of recent operation. Whatever had been printed was gone. I opened the desk drawer. His work charger, gone. His backup external drive, a flat silver rectangle that lived in the top left drawer, gone. The sticky notepad with his private lists, gone. The drawer held only my things. He had come back while I was at Yara's and collected everything he intended to take. He had not left a note. Wednesday morning, the shared bank app showed a notification. Scheduled payment, modified by account holder D. Varga. The standing order for his household contribution had been paused, effective this cycle. I called the bank. They confirmed the modification had been made in branch the previous afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, while I was at Petra's. He had been at the bank at the same time I was learning how much he already knew. That same day, an email arrived from a mediation firm called Wellstead on Strand Row. It said an initial consultation had been booked for the following Monday at 2 o'clock, and that attendance was voluntary, but the session would proceed regardless. Dimitri had given them my email address without asking me. The subject line read, Wellstead Mediation, Initial Consultation, Varga/Varga. Both sides of the slash were my married name. I printed the email and left it on the kitchen counter, where it stayed for 3 days. On Friday afternoon, I was in the glass conference room at the advertising firm, ostensibly on a client call. I had bought a basic pay-as-you-go handset at the pharmacy on Holt Street on Thursday morning, a small and ordinary-looking device that I had told myself was a practical precaution. During a section of the call where I was not required to speak, I opened the second phone and sent a message to the number Marco had used to contact me. I asked him, directly and clearly, whether he would be willing, if contacted by a professional acting on behalf of my husband, to describe our interaction at the Lakehouse as a brief and non-significant conversation that had been mischaracterized in later accounts. I pressed send. I put the phone in my coat pocket. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see Renata, at the main office desk, looking at her screen. She was not looking at me. But I was visible through the glass, and the time of the call was logged in the firm's system. And the use of a second device during a scheduled session was the kind of thing Renata noticed and later described in 2 sentences to a human resources coordinator. Marco forwarded my message to his solicitor the same day. His solicitor passed it to Wellstead Mediation as a document of concern. On Saturday morning, I was in the pharmacy queue on Holt Street collecting a prescription when Owen Park appeared 3 places ahead of me in the line. He turned and saw me and said hello. I asked if we could talk, if I could give him the context and the timeline, make sure he understood the sequence correctly before any version of it reached people who mattered to both of us. He looked at me for a moment and then said, carefully, that he had heard what Petra said at the cafe and that there was no version of context that changed what he heard. He said he was not angry at me. He said he did not think he could stay neutral and that I should know this before I invested any more in his understanding. He turned back to the counter. I stood behind him in the fluorescent pharmacy light and said nothing else. He collected his prescription and left without looking back. I collected mine and stood at the counter for a moment longer than necessary because outside the door was the ordinary Saturday street and I was not ready for it yet. Saturday afternoon I came home to find that Dimitri's car had been in the car park and was now gone, facing outward when it arrived, the shape of a visit with an exit already planned. On the entrance hall mail table, there was a new envelope addressed to me from Wellstead Mediation, thicker than the first. I took it upstairs and put it on the kitchen counter without opening it. Dimitri came to the apartment at 6 on Saturday evening. He sat in the chair across from me, not the sofa, the chair, and said he wanted to have one honest conversation before Monday. He said he had been to Strand Row. He said he had spoken to someone whose job it was to help him proceed correctly. He said he was offering her one last opportunity to tell him the sequence, in her own words, before other people's accounts became the primary record. He asked whether she had been in contact with anyone from the Lakehouse weekend in the previous 72 hours and whether she had used a method of contact she would not normally use. He asked specifically what she had been trying to prevent with the contact made on Friday afternoon, and whether she believed the person she contacted had made the same calculation she had about the value of that message. I told him he was speculating and that I would not confirm or deny private communications. He said it was not speculation. He said it was documented. He said the envelope on the counter was her copy of a preliminary evidence summary and that he would handle what needed to be handled correctly. He stood. I asked what he meant by documented. He said I should read the envelope. He left. I opened it at 9 that night. Inside was a 2-page document listing items submitted to Wellstead Mediation by Dimitri's legal representative. Petra's written statement, submitted voluntarily on Tuesday. A forwarded message received from Marco Castell's solicitor, sent from a number linked to a pay-as-you-go handset purchased on Holt Street on Thursday. A description of a physical photo strip, 4 frames, currently in the possession of the petitioner, and a statement from Renata Klaas, senior account manager, noting the use of a secondary device during firm hours on Friday afternoon. I called Dimitri. He answered and said she had read the summary. I said he had been building this since before the cafe. He said he started the day she refused to answer him honestly in their bedroom 2 months ago. He said he had hoped to make it unnecessary. He said goodnight and ended the call. Sunday morning, Cass sent a message. He asked her for a statement too, and she had told him the truth and she was sorry. Below it, another line. She had found the strip copy in her old photos folder, an auto-sync backup from the weekend she did not know existed. He had asked her to email it to Wellstead and she had. The evidence file now contained the digital version Cass had forwarded. I went to the hallway and unzipped the grey coat's internal pocket. The physical strip was still there. 4 frames, time-stamped by the strip machine's internal clock at 11:52 p.m. on the Saturday of the Bachelorette weekend. I held it for a moment. I put it back. Monday morning, a calendar notification arrived that I had not set, a shared link I had clicked when verifying the mediation location. It showed Dimitri's appointment, Cascade Building, 10 a.m., Hartley and Cole. His own office building. The mediation was at 2. His appointment was at 10. I called him. He did not answer. I put on the grey coat and left the apartment. The Cascade Building lobby had the specific quiet of professional spaces on a Monday morning. Marble floor, low grey chairs near the revolving door, the hum of the climate system underneath everything. I gave Dimitri's name at the security desk and waited. 4 minutes later, a woman in a dark blazer came from the elevator and said my full legal name. I confirmed it. She had been retained by Hartley and Cole to effect service. She handed me a sealed envelope with a red tab, noted the time, 10:17 a.m., and returned to the elevator. Dimitri was not in the lobby. Inside, a separation agreement with a motion for temporary exclusive use of the home, a response deadline, and a first hearing date. Attached was a defamation risk notice arising from the Marco contact, filed as Exhibit C. The evidence schedule listed Petra's written statement, Cass's digital strip copy, time-stamped 11:52 p.m., the forwarded message from the unregistered number on Friday, Renata's statement about the secondary device, and a timeline of 12 documented dialogue attempts. Each was dated. Each had a note on her response type. She was reading his record of every conversation she had refused to have honestly. She called him. He said she had read it. She asked whether they could talk. He said the process was underway. She said his name. He said he hoped she was well and ended the call. The revolving door turned as someone entered from the street, and the cold air moved through briefly before the door sealed again. What she believed was power was arriving at a story before anyone else could name it. But the photo strip was in her own coat. The Marco message came from a phone she bought to be untraceable. Cass's backup was in a folder Cass herself had forgotten. He did not build a case against her. He collected what she left behind. Closure snapshot. 12 days after service, the apartment was quiet in the way of a space that has had something removed without the walls changing. The response had been filed. The mediation was in 8 days. Petra had not been in touch. Cass sent one message saying she was sorry and went quiet. Owen liked a work post, just a like, the nod of someone who sees you but is no longer close. Marco's number was disconnected. The grey coat hung on the hallway hook and the photo strip was in the kitchen drawer. She sat on a bench near the Old Mill Bridge with her phone face down and looked at the water and understood that the frame she had built, for the weekend, for the marriage, for the version of herself she had been presenting, had not held, not because he dismantled it, but because the things inside it were always going to show through, and she had run out of ways to keep them arranged.